All right, I don't know what time it is on your clock, but I know what I'm getting ready for. It is time for the Professional CISO podcast with David Malaco.
Welcome, one and all, to the Professional CISO podcast. I'm your host, David Malaco. This show is an exploration of the topics necessary to professionalize the role of the CISO. All right, gang, today, great guest today. We have an interview with a security leader that has implemented and matured cybersecurity programs at the highest level across and multiple times. Her roots are in the analyst space originally, and then into information security architecture and cybersecurity leadership. Some notables about our guest today. She grew up in Canada, north of Toronto, and I won't say it, I'll let you do it. And then even better, she was a nanny to a countess in her earlier years, a descendant of the Harrachs, which is a Bohemian nobility in the German-Austria area. So interesting there, love that. I think it's probably maybe one of the more interesting ones we've ever had. Before we get started, I want to do a shout out. We're doing the show, Professional CISO Show. We're going to be at the 12th Annual North Texas ISA Conference on September 6th. And it's 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. We're kind of recording two different segments. We're going to rotate in a lot of the speakers that day, so you get some insights as to what's going on. Doesn't mean you don't show up. We want you there. But then again, you get a nice recap. You miss anything, you'll be able to hear it from us, straight from the horse's mouth. So more information coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you all there. All right, so let's talk about being a professional CISO. Today's episode, our guest is Renee Guttmann.
Thank you.
And she is currently the founder and principal of CISO Hive. She has held positions, wait a minute, there's a long list here, Coca-Cola, Royal Caribbean Cruises, Campbell Soup Company, Capital One, and Time Warner. Yes?
Yes.
Did I miss anything?
Sure, but it makes it look like I can't keep a job at all.
Love it. Please welcome Renee Guttmann.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. It was when I got to see that we were going to be able to do this. What an honor, number one.
Thank you.
You've been in the
27 RSAs.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
But who's counting?
Who's counting, right? So let's get started with that. Let's get the audience get to know Renee a little bit. So give me kind of that I'm not even going to say 1 minute. I'm going to say 2 minutes because I know it's going to reach that level. Give me the early Renee days where technology first came on your radar, where how you kind of made that decision making to get into it, and then give me the story arc all the way till today.
Sure. So when I was the nanny, for the count and countess, I had been accepted into a master's program. I thought I was going to be a museum director, and I got accepted into a program to do museology. But while I was overseas, I got exposed to computers. In fact, they weren't computers, they were word processors. And I decided that what I would do instead of doing my museology degree, I would come back and I would take some courses around computers. So I came back, I worked for a year to fund my program, and then I took a 6-month crash course. And that was my early exposure. I learned how to program an assembly, whatever you want to call it now, Fortran, COBOL, all the RPG. Got my first job, and then went into help desk, and really have never left computers for, now I don't want to really date myself, but it will be 42 years since I first touched one of the, a computer. And the way I got into information security, I first started doing email before email existed. And then I lost my job during a merger. And I walked across the hall and I opened the door, and there were a bunch of security people sitting there, not really well known to the rest of the organization, and I asked them for a job and they gave me one, and I've never looked back. And that was 92, 93, that was the time. So by way of context, the first RSA that I went to, there were 5 vendors. So the vendor display area was about the size of this room. Everybody had a small table that looked like a card table.
Right.
I remember a couple of the vendors. It was Entrust, RSA. I don't remember the other 3, and I've got to go look those up, but that was it. And we called it data security, then we called it IT security. And I was really lucky. I'll just say that. And my son says you're really lucky, but it seems the harder I worked, the luckier I got.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so I started at Glaxo Wellcome, and I went on to Gartner, Capital One, built their first infrastructure for online banking, Time Inc., Time Warner, I got recruited to Coca-Cola in Atlanta, and then I went on to RCL. There was a little thing in the middle, but I actually built a security practice for Optiv. And then I went to Royal Caribbean. I got recruited to Campbell Soup because they wanted help with their OT environment, and that is what I have been doing at Royal Caribbean. And then around the end of COVID, I decided that I really needed to do something different, and moved to Florida with my husband, and wanted to have enough time that I could go cruising, because that's what I do in my spare time.
Love it. Which you just got back
I just
from
got back from a cruise. It was my birthday cruise, so
Love it.
I've set the tone now for my husband. I've said I'm never going to take my birthday again in the U.S. It will be somewhere exotic.
Lovely. I
So-
love that. I want to pull on one of those strings in there, which is the conference aspect of things. Obviously, very early in your career, you saw that as something. Talk to me about that, because if you're talking 24 RSAs,
27.
27, sorry, that's a lot, right? Okay, even better. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So talk to me about your view on conferences and how impactful that is.
Sure. Very early on, and I was really, there were two women that would show up at conferences. It was myself and another lady named Ron McLean, who has since retired. She was Bank of America, Barclays. And it was really important. The networking side of our industry is so important. In fact, when I interviewed people, I would say, tell me about your network, and I don't mean your home network. If I give you an assignment, tell me how you're going to start thinking about something that I'm asking you to do. Who do you know? Who can you call? So it's the lifeline aspect.
Right.
And I'm mentoring today, and the first thing that I point out to the people that I mentor is that your networks, you don't have one. It takes time to network, but that's your lifeline, and that's your lifeline. You know, when I first started at Coca-Cola, I thought, what have I done? And I went to RSA within about 3 weeks of joining the organization. I talked to one of my colleagues, and I said, I have to have a strategy in this amount of time. And he said, let me send you mine. Let me send you what I presented. And I took that, and I at least had some kind of template for how I was going to go about thinking of placing my strategy together. But the networking side is, and then when I, frankly, was in job transitions, that network was the lifeline, of the people that would, it's that umbrella of people that will come and they will, frankly, be there to support you. And I still today, in fact, I'm mentoring some people, and every time I see them post that they've been involved in something, they've spoken at an event, I make a point, to post on it. But that was a big part. That's a big part of the advice that I give when I mentor, is that you have to have that network. On this cruise, there was an artist, and the artist said, no network, no work.
Wow. So I like to, one of my sayings that I kind of put out there, folks, is we are smarter than me, right? And that, I think that's the network effect that you talk about.
It is.
Sure.
It is. I mean, I will tell you that when I was at Time Inc., I started the position, I was just me. And I knew that I needed more than me, although I didn't know why we needed security in the first place, but that was in 2000. So I went to my boss and I said, I need to hire 2 people. And he said, why do you have to hire 2 people? And I said, because right now the department is me, myself, and I. And myself and I are not getting along. So we need to have, and it needs to be 3 because we need to have somebody to break the tie. And I got the 2, he would just look at me and say, like, really? And I said, yeah, I need 2 people.
Love it. That's greatness.
But yeah, you're stronger together. And the good thing about a network, a good network, is they won't just tell you you're doing everything right. They'll go, what on earth are you thinking
Sanity
about?
check.
A sanity check, right? It's like, what kind of crazy idea is that?
Love it.
Going to Black Hat 2024 in Las Vegas? Armis is a Black Hat sustaining partner this year and will be there August 5th through the 8th. Explore how to protect your entire attack surface and manage your cyber risk exposure in real time. Visit booth number 1820 to discover Armis Centrix, the cyber exposure management platform. Catch a demo or theater presentation, engage with industry peers, and experience the full Armis ecosystem to better see, protect, and manage your entire attack surface. Visit www.armis.com/black-hat to book a meeting with an Armis expert, or to view a full listing of all Armis Black Hat activities, including networking, happy hours, and after parties. Armis looks forward to seeing you in Las Vegas.
All right, so I'm going to give you kind of the standard question, but the good news is it doesn't have a standard answer.
All right.
So do you feel like, believe in that idea that we need to professionalize the role of CISO? If the answer is yes, tell me why. What does that mean to you?
Yeah.
If no, great too, because obviously, as we talked last night at dinner, robust engagement and discussions are a good thing. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the only word I'm struggling with is professionalized, but let me tell you why I think the role has to change, or the profession has to change, because I already told you that we used to call it IT security, data security. It was almost like we were looking at things in silos. And I think today we have to focus more on what is the industry, what is the business that I'm associated with, and focus on their outcome. Because really what I'm supporting is their outcome, their mission, right? What do they need to do? When I was at Time Inc., I really had to make sure that the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition got out on time, for example. So it's really, really important. And so when I went into manufacturing, I wasn't worried about confidentiality. I was worried about operational risk. I was worried about resiliency. So I think that's the second thing. We have to start paying attention to operations risk, right? Which is the A in that whole CIA thing, right? And then integrity. We have to start thinking about, like, what does it mean that I can't trust the information that I'm receiving? So that C is getting a whole lot smaller, in my opinion. So that's the second thing. We have to, focus on operations risk, business outcomes, operations risk. And the third, I think we have to then, because it's still a massive problem, it just got bigger, we have to be able to financially, articulate financially in ways that make sense to our business leaders, how we're managing risk. Can we even stress test our controls? That's a thread I've been pulling on lately, is how do you potentially stress test whether you're in a position to actually, be able to mitigate some type of event that might occur. I once spoke with a CFO of a large company. It was a Friday afternoon. He was just ticked. He was so ticked, and it wasn't my company. And he just said to me, "It's just a black hole over there. I hate it. It's a black hole. I keep spending money. I have no idea what I'm getting, and I have no idea, if they're making up stuff." And I think that that's the third piece. And I think, so for a long time I would play around with things like FAIR, but now, there are more advanced ways of looking at, things, whether it's cyber risk quantification, whatever you want to call it. But it's really about how do I know which controls are more important than others? And I'm really pleased to see that we now have more capability and that there are systems. The NACD, in fact, the National Association of Corporate Directors, they have access to a tool that can help board members actually understand better the financial properties of the cybersecurity program. And that's where I think we need to play more.
Love it. So an observation and a question.
Okay.
So the observation is, it seems like you were onto those things relatively early in your career.
Sure.
But here we are sitting talking about how either current or future cybersecurity leaders, i.e. CISOs, need to have that acumen. What happened? Like, why is there such a divide on those who have and those who have not? Do you have an opinion on that?
I do. I think that it's too easy. It was too easy, how about that, to get caught in what I call the compliance trap, right? We've spoken about this before. Other people have talked about it. And my checking box is over here. And I don't think that that's enough, but I still see that there are people that really, that becomes, what they focus on.
Right.
And I think that when you take a broader look at, what our jobs are, the CIA, that you'll see that that's not the way to go about the position. And the trap is falling into what I'm going to say is that compliance box.
Got it.
I'll stop.
You don't have to.
All right, here's my pet peeve.
Absolutely.
Here it comes. And I spoke about this at RSA. I've heard people say, "Don't show me that report. I don't want to see it. Don't show that to me. I don't want to know about it." Because if I know about it, I have to do something about it.
Right.
And I call that the fear of finding out. And I'm troubled by that as a behavior. I think that we do need to at least know what our attack surface is, to understand the outcomes of our business. And yeah, sometimes you're going to see something or find something that is not going to be ideal. But, better to know about it, at least, categorize the risk, look at it, and then say, okay, well, maybe this is still more important, that I've got to tackle it, but at least I'm aware of it. And, I used to describe it as, I'd see a rock sitting over there, and I'd look at that rock, and I go, okay, there's a rock, and there's something underneath that rock, and I better go figure out what it is. So, but the problem was, if I lift up the rock, am I going to find something this deep, or am I going to be able to see China? And it didn't matter. I had to know, which is, I think, one of the things that, for me as a leader, it was always that need to understand things that maybe nobody else was thinking about. That's how I, at Royal, I wound up looking at what was, on a ship that maybe people didn't quite understand.
Right. Do you find...
So the forward-thinking part is the part that I think people really need to start embracing. And don't worry about whether you might be, responsible for what created it over there. That's what part of the fear of finding out is about, is you're afraid you won't have enough time to deal with it. You don't know that you won't get blamed for it. But
do you feel like that might be a product of kind of the recent actions of like the SEC and FTC and things like that on CISO specifically?
I do, because I hear people say, go and define your job and make sure you have a box around it that you can define the bright lines. I'm not sure how really possible that is, and I don't. I understand it. I really do. Yes, I do think it's a byproduct of what's happened.
But we have to resist that urge. We have to be able to
Well, I think it's part of the
through.
evolution of the role. If you think about, unfortunately, the events of this, that have been happening with, airlines not being able to, get their planes off the ground and other things that have happened, with health. I do think that there just isn't a bright line, especially if one of your core reasons to be is to protect the outcomes of the company, right? And then you're also focused on operations, especially if you start probing into operations. I don't know how that bright lines really do exist.
So I think this naturally goes into maybe a little bit of the next conversation, because we're just going to stay on the hot topics. There's obviously been a lot of growth in the CISO, or a lot of outsized demands. There's a huge part of our industry that discusses this quite a bit, which is, where should the CISO report? So would love to hear, we've had folks on the past say it's general counsel is a great place for it to land. Keep it out of the CIO because, or keep it out of technology because of the nature of maybe conflict, budgets having, overlap, things like that. Would love to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, I decided to talk to ChatGPT about this. And ChatGPT did not mention legal at all. Well, not with the version I was using. So, and I actually tried to. So, I am not a fan of reporting to general counsel, although I know people that are wildly successful reporting to general counsel. Because general counsel, legal sounds too much like law, which sounds too much like compliance, which sounds like too much like backseat driving. And I'm more about, the forward thinking. I don't even know, how most, if I think about marketing and or any other department, finance, if the legal department, I'm not saying they embrace cybersecurity, but I'm saying I don't know that they love lawyers any better. So I don't think reporting into that necessarily is good for my engagement of the business. But the CIO could be a good option. That seemed to be, if you had a CIO that was actually had some business acumen, but that might be a better option. I'm not sure about the CEO. I've never reported to the CEO. I've spoken to the CEO, but. And I know that could be a good place to report as well. But I never needed to, I guess the difference for me is that the first thing I did when I went into a company, and I always reported to the CIO, is I said, listen, Mrs. CIO, we don't ever want to give the impression that we're sweeping things under the carpet, or I'm going to say no because you've told me no. And so back in 2000, I created this little policy, whatever you want to call it, said, if we disagree, we have to take it to a higher authority.
Love it.
And so that higher authority, we defined it, and we said, okay, it'll be the CFO, general counsel, and if we have to drag the CEO into it, we will. And so we created this you can't overrule me policy. The other thing is I always had access. That was one of the criteria for taking a job. Am I going to have to give you my calendar, and are you going to have to approve every meeting that I take? If the answer is yes, that's not a good place to be, right? So that was the second thing. So with those two things, I have access, and you can't overrule me. Then I never felt constrained by, IT. And I enforced that first policy because there was a time that I got overruled by the deputy CIO. And he didn't realize that this little agreement had been in place. And so I got overruled, and he said, I'm overruling you. The CIO's on vacation. I said, no, can't happen. I pulled it out, and I said, and here's my write-up that I'm going to take to the CFO and the general counsel. I suggest you prepare yours. And he said, I'll give you what you need. Give me 2 weeks. But we're not having that conversation with the general counsel. I had to use it once.
And I think the key on that one is the key takeaway for folks is do it up front, right?
Yeah, do it up front.
Like as you're walking in the door, and like you said, I think I want to highlight that as well. That if they're not willing to do that, that's probably not a place that you want to be, right?
No.
It's and I think maybe CISOs have a hard time with that. I think ones that are experienced and have been there, done that, have no problem with that. I think the newer ones are the ones that want to get into the seat may have a little bit of an issue. So I think it's definitely great advice to those.
Yeah, and at the time it wasn't so horrible. I mean, maybe now it might be perceived. Now you'd have a bigger committee. You'd have a risk committee, right?
Right.
But before that existed, I needed something,
Right.
And I said, look, it's to protect you, and it's basically also, it's to protect both of us.
Absolutely. And same thing. So like where I'm at, I created a risk committee, and that for that very reason. So very similar in that we have the ability to make sure that we have an adjudicator, right?
That's right.
That if there's a conflict, typically there's not. Like I can tell you over the last 4 years, not hardly any conflict. But when the time comes and you want those weighty, and you need those weighty opinions.
That's right.
I need finance to weigh in, right? I need HR to weigh in. So it's that kind of approach.
Well, and the other thing is you need their perspective.
Right.
Right? They'll look at it maybe, hopefully in a different way than you might, and actually tell you where the potholes are.
Got it. Love it. Great stuff. Okay, so I want to get to our last thing because, of course, your favorite part, 10 questions, is coming up. So I want to tease that a little bit. But I want to talk a little bit. You've spent a lot of times, you referenced it about rural Caribbean, obviously at Coca-Cola and at Campbell's as well, about the IT-OT convergence. So where are we sitting with that from your perspective, right? I would say that you're probably the foremost experts, if I had to give anyone that I know as far as the experience over time. So are we getting better there on that convergence?
I think we are. I saw my first blue screen on a manufacturing line in 2012 in Cape Town. I said, what is that? And in 2016, that's when I went to Royal. And we weren't talking OT in 2012, to my knowledge. And then 2016, we were starting to speak about it. At that point, I had somebody that worked for me that said, there's a lot of things on a ship that are connected that, IT don't even support. And so we went and found them. We we looked at them. And so the first was just that desire to know. But now I think it's pretty, Black Hat actually has a session on industrial control systems that I think I'll attend. I think it's really important. It goes back to operations. The problem that exists is that you have the impression that that you're going to take your same vulnerability management policy and slap it against the OT. Well, you're not. I mean, you may patch your Windows systems, once a month, but you're certainly not patching a bunch of things in OT, especially without the permission of the manufacturer. So you've got to almost create like a different mindset, a different policy. And then the other thing is you've got to learn their language, like the Purdue model. I didn't know what that was. I mean, don't ask me what it is now, but but you do have to learn that language, and it's different than the language of IT. And you're focused on operations. You're not so focused on confidentiality. So you really have to be prepared to almost, learn something almost net new. And your team have to be open to doing things in a different manner. IT does, because you need them as well. And IT will say, no, we just do that. And I'm like, no, you can't just do that. Because then I'll lose credibility in the manufacturing world if you try to imply like that. End of life is pretty common in an OT environment. So again, it's taking some of the gospel truths that we've always had and just tweaking them a little bit to be more appropriate for manufacturing. I think that we're getting there. I mean, I went to a couple manufacturing conferences early on, and again, same thing, 10 people, but now a lot more traction. And I want to say there's more standards. I mean, there's even a standard, if you can imagine, for how to protect a ship. I don't remember it existing in 2016 necessarily, but there's actually a document on how to protect a ship.
So when we talk about the future of this, do you think we're still going to continue to draw closer? Is this a case where we would ever have a true convergence, or is these things going to always kind of run?
I would hope there would be a true convergence. I don't think we're that. I think the threats, the way you handle a lot of things are the same threats. So I do think that, especially if you start thinking about the security role as a risk role, then I do believe that there's I mean, I had an entire team that knew about manufacturing, and that was their role, was to understand manufacturing. But a lot of things, I mean, the networks were still connected. We still had to do backups.
Right.
There were a lot of things that were common, and so I don't see necessarily having two groups doing the same thing and stepping on each other. I'd like to think that you could create some kind of group that would be responsible for both, and that would have the synergy or would have the ability to learn lessons from each other. And air gap, it's hard to really air gap. So you are really connected.
Final question on that. If I'm a practitioner, whatever range of where I'm at in my career, or leader, would you recommend that I need to start kind of brushing up on the OT side to make sure that I'm a well-rounded individual, specifically talking about that, you never know what that next role is going to be. Plus, there's always going to be more IoT coming in.
That's right.
Right. So is that something you think, hey,
I think you have to know about it. I mean, you've got cameras, you've got sensors. I had cameras that, had been purchased from China, and the manufacturer said just hack them to make them work. And I said, no, the answers were going to get rid of them. So I don't even know what company you would work in that wouldn't have something. Or even when COVID happened, I mean, people had connected devices, right, to screen people when they were going in and out that were connected to an HR system. So I don't know how you just sort of say, no, I'm not going to learn anything about sensors.
Right. Love it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Gang,
I've got my notes.
10 questions. Obviously, we have a very well-prepared guest, which I love. No surprises. What's your favorite word?
Serendipity.
Love it. Any context?
Yes. So first I'm going to tell you what it means. It's a beneficial event that occurs by chance. And for me, I think the fact that I'm even in this industry is a bit of serendipity. I like it. It just rolls off the tongue.
I like it.
Right?
Yep. What's your least favorite word?
Coincidence. Is it a coincidence that the SAP system's down after we installed that last little rule in the SD-WAN? Oh, sure. No, not related at all. Not.
I'll say it, but so you won't have to. Is it a coincidence that 8.5 million PCs and laptops went down over the last weekend?
Yeah, I think there's a sunburst thing that's going on right now. No, but here's what I would say. At what point in time did somebody wake up and say, oh crap, that's related to our software. Like there had to be a moment of truth, right? A light bulb, because things were happening, right? All of a sudden, like, I mean, maybe they happened in Australia and it's like a one-off, and all of a sudden it's a two-off, and and then it's an oh crap, that's not a coincidence,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That would have been a tough moment, I would think. I'd like to know who actually figured that part out.
Definitely call that an oh shit moment.
That would be one of those.
Okay. What area of your work do you find most interesting?
The people side. You know, the fact that we wouldn't be in this situation if it weren't for people. And so we didn't go into the fact that I have a degree in archaeology. And yeah, right. So for me, it was always about the people. And, you know, we're kind of crummy. I mean, we steal, we do things that are just not always in everybody's best interest. And now we've just figured out how to do that, you know, without being caught as fast.
What area of your work is the most challenging for you?
The most challenging, you know, I've been a fixer. We talked about this too. I've been a builder and a fixer. And the fixing part is hard because people they look at you with the deer in the headlight kind of look, and they're waiting for you to figure out whether you want them on your team, what your strategy is going to be. And, you know, I once had 3 people resign in the same week. Now, it was expected. Let me say partially it was expected. It was expected they would all do it, you know, in 1 week. And so the first 2 resigned on the Monday, and then the third resigned on Tuesday, and he said to me, I still am giving my 2 weeks notice, but I didn't want to resign on Monday because I figured you might have a stroke with 3 people resigning on one day. So you've got to have contingency plans. I mean, you've got to get in there. And if you know you're going to be doing quite a bit, you've got to have somebody, you know, you've got to have that outsourced group. But it's hard. It's hard. You know, you're playing with people's livelihood. And
Right. What sound or noise do you love?
a loon.
A loon.
That's my Canadian thing.
Can you describe that to the audience of those who may not know what that is?
It's a bird. My audience.
On Golden Pond.
I was going to say that on Golden
Sorry,
Pond.
now, okay.
It's a bird, and it has this beautiful sound. And I've heard that you've got to keep driving further north now to actually be able to hear them. I haven't heard a loon in a long time, so that might be my next road
I would
trip.
say next trip. Sounds like it. What sound or noise do you hate?
The sound of your tire blowing out, and that's happened to me on I-95, and it's a terrible thing.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so
Dangerous.
avoid that.
We didn't cover this ahead of time, which I apologize. What's your favorite curse word? If you're willing to say it, you can always defer.
So ChatGPT also has an opinion here, and it's that one that starts with F and ends with K, and it seems to be the most favorite curse word of all the other guests, so I'll just say ditto.
Okay, love it. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would like to be a chef. I started playing around with cooking. I'm not a good cook, but I start thinking about my meals around lunchtime, and I experiment. And I even order bean sprouts off of Amazon these days because I can't find bean sprouts in the town that I live in without having to drive like 30 miles. And so yeah.
What profession would you not like to do?
You know, coming off this cruise that I was on, I watched the Swiss Guard, and I watched, you know, different people standing in front of royal palaces being still, and I thought that would be a really bad profession for me because I wiggle too much. I've always got parts moving, so that would be really bad for me.
Love it. And finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear your God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
2 things. The first time I go there, I'd like him to say, "You're not done yet, go back and finish up." That's the first time. When I go back again the second time, I think he'd say, "Look, it's okay, you're done now. And your friends and family and your parents are over in that room and they're waiting for you." That's what I would hope. I hope he sends me back the first time.
I understand. Well, Renee Guttmann, I truly appreciate your time today. What a wonderful session.
Thank you.
I learned a lot, number one.
Thank you.
Obviously your experience is virtually unparalleled. Very few people.
It's called age.
No, I think it's called experience, and I think it's great to have someone and your willingness to come on and talk to us and share that wisdom with the audience, and hopefully they have those takeaways that we always look to give. So,
Thank you.
Obviously, in this time we covered quite a bit. We covered some IT/OT convergence, which I think that's a upcoming topic that we probably need to make sure that we're well rounded out when it comes to our development plans. We did talk about a little bit of the path around where the CISO should land. Again, the goal of this podcast is to make sure that as you listen, that you hear all the different sides. I don't want to just profess to have one way and this is the way it's supposed to be. We need to be variable in our approach. And then obviously we talk about where the CISO role is going. How do we develop this thing? What may be professional or otherwise, what it should look like. But in the end, I want to say, I renew the call. It's time to professionalize the role of the CISO. In the meantime, I wish you health, happiness, and success in your journey in becoming the professional CISO. Let's do this.
We're professionalizing the CISO role, so please subscribe to the Professional CISO podcast.